Good morning and good afternoon. My name is John Herbst, the director of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. We have a wonderful event for you today on Ukraine's foreign policy, which will be kicked off by the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Mr. Kuleba. And we are doing this event in conjunction with the U.S. Institute of Peace and with Chatham House. And Arisia Lutsevitz of Chatham House will be our moderator, and she will introduce our guests. Thank you. Over to you, Arisia.
Thank you, John. Good day to all of us, to all of you joining us from different corners of the world. I am managing Ukraine Forum at Chatham House, and paradoxically, this pandemic, on one hand, put us all in the isolation, but on the other, as if the walls collapsed, and we all feel, in a way, much closer right now. Definitely, I feel the walls of Chatham House collapsed. We're all working from home. So today we have an excellent panel put together by the Atlantic Council on the prospects for the resolution of conflict in Donbass. And it has been more than 6 years that this conflict is simmering in the center of Europe. In a way, it lasts longer than the Second World War when you think about it. And Russia wages a full spectrum warfare against Ukraine, regardless of Western pressure, regardless Ukraine's own effort to keep the enemy at bay. President Zelenskyy came to power last year with a very strong promise to end the war. He has revived the Normandy meeting, and we had several meetings of the contacts group in Minsk. But the question is, what have we achieved so far? What is Ukraine's strategic position? What Ukraine is trying to achieve? And today with us, we have an excellent panel, and we will kick off with the introductory remarks from the new foreign minister, Kuleba, who is quite young as a minister with less than 1 month in office, but he has been part of the diplomatic corps from 2003. He has served as the Ukraine permanent representative to the Council of Europe from 2016. He has also been the Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration. He is an author of a very interesting book called The War for Reality: How to Win in the World of Fakes, Truth and Communities. Other participants, I would like to introduce all of you at this point briefly, includes William Taylor, ambassador to Ukraine from 2006 and 2009, but most recently in 2019, he served as chargé d'affaires at the US Embassy in Ukraine. It was a bit of a time travel, but these were interesting times. And I believe it's the first kind of public appearance of Ambassador Taylor after a very famous testimony he gave in the impeachment hearings. We do have Slava Vakarchuk, who needs little introduction in Ukraine, but now globally he is becoming the voice of reformer. He's a member of parliament and founder of Holos Party. He was very active both in Orange Revolution and in Euromaidan. He is a rock singer activist, politician that really has a vision how to change Ukraine. We also have with us today Ambassador John Herbst, who is a very experienced career diplomat with almost 31 years experience in the diplomatic service, also an ambassador to Ukraine. He was there before William Taylor, 2003-2006. And last but not least, Adrian Karatnitsky, who is a watcher of Ukraine. He is frequently in Kyiv. He is a former president of Freedom House. Currently, he is the senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. He keeps his hand on Ukraine's pulse, and he understands really well both domestic and foreign policy. So I would like to start with Minister Kuleba explaining us what's new in Ukraine's negotiating position, what remains the same, and how Ukraine plans to achieve peace in Donbass. Over to you, Foreign Minister.
Wow. That's the question sounds ambitious. First of all, thank you for having me with you today, or this still morning, I guess, in the United States. It's an honor to have this discussion with former ambassadors to Ukraine, with Sviatoslav, who is one of the political leaders in Ukraine, and with distinguished experts. Honestly speaking, I do not observe major changes in our policy towards Russia, and nor do I observe any major changes in Russian policy towards Ukraine. I think we are still discussing the same issues as we used to discuss since 2014. I think that the main narratives are still in place. Russia insists now that it is not a party to the conflict with the same level of vigor and assertiveness as it did so in 2014. Russia calls on Ukraine to engage in direct dialogue with so-called Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics, as it has been doing since 2014. These things are still there. And on our side, we do not engage in direct dialogue with the entities I mentioned. We insist that trilateral contact group is deliberately called trilateral because it consists of Ukraine, Russia, and OSCE. And of course, we consider Russia as party to the conflict and not as a mediator or facilitator or in any other capacity. However, at the same time, we engage with Russia on such issues as release of prisoners or exchange of prisoners, whatever term we may use here, and on disengagement along the front line. And if we manage to build trust between two parties, Russia and Ukraine, in these spheres, we can move further and try to unlock other issues which are on the agenda. So that's where we seem to stand at the moment. There are many emotions, many concerns. Negotiating with Russia is like walking a minefield. You never know where it will blow up. So reactions and counter-reactions from all corners can be easily understood. But main lines of our policy and our approach to settling this conflict remains absolutely unchanged. Did I miss anything? Did you ask anything more? Sorry.
No, if you would like, if you're okay, if you don't have any other kind of introductory remarks that you would like to make, I would like to follow up a little bit with a question. Like you've mentioned that the narratives and the policies remain the same, and Russia's strategic objectives towards Ukraine remain the same. So how can Ukrainian diplomacy, Ukrainian foreign service work towards nudging Russia's position? Because we all know Ukrainians would like to have and believe that the only way to have peace in Ukraine, it has to be a negotiated outcome. In this, world that is now affected by pandemic, the way Russia is trying to use the pandemic to both undermine Ukraine from inside, but also put a question on sanctions as a humanitarian issue. Do you find it more complicated to maintain solidarity of Western allies on this front, or support to Ukraine and solidarity with Ukraine remains unchanged also on Western front?
Well, when it comes to solidarity, the situation is always the same. It doesn't matter how strong the solidarity you enjoy, you always want more. And I think this is part of political reality for any country. What makes me confident that we can still count on solidarity is actually the sequence of recent events in the European Union and in the United Nations, where a number of countries led the effort to prevent Russia from adopting the declaration initiated by it with a noble title to like a solidarity of nations to combat COVID-19, but with a very specific paragraph in the text calling for easing sanctions or lifting them on so-called humanitarian grounds. So you test solidarity and friendship and partnership in action, and that was a good test. And we registered the support coming from the United States, the strong position voiced by the European Union, by High Representative Borrell, clearly saying that sanctions imposed in response to violation of human rights and international law have nothing to do with humanitarian grounds. So this was a good test for this solidarity. And as far as I can conclude from the events of last week, the solidarity is there. Everything else is a matter of diplomacy, negotiations, finding striking balances, and engaging relative actors in the game.
Thank you for answering that. And I would like to push you a little bit more on this consultative council, because it was a protocol signed during the trilateral group in Minsk. It caused quite a lot of anxiety internally in Ukraine. So I wanted to ask you, what is the added value of having such a body, and how can it contribute to conflict resolution? The opponents of this would argue that it's kind of playing into exactly those Russian narratives and pushing Ukraine to recognize, legitimize quasi-authorities, Russian basically proxy groups. And did you hear any feedback from Ukraine's partners in the Normandy format on this consultative council? Because they also, according to this protocol, are supposed to delegate their representatives. Thank you.
In my 1 month in office as foreign minister, I have been pushed a little bit further on the issue of consultative council so many times that, you know, it almost causes no reaction in me when you push me again. This issue has a lot of received a lot of attention. The idea of consultative council came to life in less than a week since my appointment, so I was not standing at the kind of origins of this idea, of this initiative. I had to face it as a reality. I think there are 2 points which have to be taken into account. First, as I said, Ukraine will insist on the current structure of the trilateral contact group, and this trilateral contact group consists of 3 actors: Russia, Ukraine, OSCE. Everything else is a matter for internal structuring, but we will not incite within the contact group. But we are not seeking direct dialogue with Donetsk and Lugansk. But we have to engage and talk with them to implement on only specific set of issues to implement certain points of the Minsk agreement. The idea of the consultative council is that we do not engage with representatives of so-called Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic, but we make our societies talk and engage with each other. And point 2 that I want to raise is that any kind of change happening on Minsk track is taken with anxiety. Because, as I mentioned earlier in one of my responses, the level of trust is running to 0. People do not trust. Public opinion has no trust in what's happening on that track. And therefore, any change or any attempt to moderate process in a slightly different way is taken with anxiety. And I understand our public opinion that was looking for more explanations and for more arguments on why this body is needed. And I understand, and I equally understand our partners who approached me in particular with questions asking for more details about this initiative and seeking more explanations on the kind of sense of on the logic of this development. Again, our goal is very simple. We have to be creative and we have to look for solutions which do not allow freezing the process taking place within Minsk format. We cannot put the situation on hold. If we allow that, we will lose time. We will, and it will be extremely difficult to recharge batteries after they are dead. So we have to look for solutions, and this is the commitment that was declared by President Zelenskyy, that he wants to end the war and he's ready to make steps forward. But these steps will not lead to crossing Ukraine's red lines, and that's also something that should be taken for granted.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions that are coming through the Q&A chat. I will unfortunately only take those that are related to Donbass, because I see some questions are related to wider foreign policy priorities, but unfortunately this is not the topic of our discussion. But one of the questions that came related to the process, the Normandy and Minsk process, is could you please speak about potential prisoner swap scheduled for this weekend? Do you have any update or any fresh information that you could share?
It's the most difficult part is to talk about prisoners exchange, because the last thing I want to do is to put it at risk by any unnecessary comment or promise given publicly. The agreement on the exchange was reached yesterday. We aim at welcoming our people back before Easter, before Orthodox Easter, to make it so it's next week. We know what are the numbers from both sides, but I will not disclose them at this point, simply because we have to be very cautious, since we talk about destinies, feelings and emotions of people. But for us, the release of people and of persons and exchanges are top priority. Because any war is first and foremost about human destinies and about lives and sufferings of our compatriots. So this will remain an absolute focus for the government to work on the release of prisoners.
Thank you, Minister. I have our audiences are coming back to more details on this consultative council, and Ellie Crowley is asking, will Russia have any role other than observer on the consultative council?
Well, first I have to tell you that the issue of consultative council has not been discussed in the trilateral contact group since early March, I think 11th of March, when it had been discussed for the first time. So for the time being, the only thing that we have related to the consultative council, the only three things which we have related to the consultative council are: first, the paper, the working paper with the description of the council of 11th of March, a very heated discussion of the consultative council in the Ukrainian society, and discussions and exchange of views on consultative council with our partners. Nothing has changed with regard to this initiative since the beginning of March, and what is written in the paper that became available to the public. And no one knows what will be the final version of the consultative council, if any, in the end, after all the rounds of negotiations.
Well, I understand that both our international partners and Ukrainian society will be closely watching how this process evolves. I think you still have about 10 minutes with us, from what I was informed. And I would like to open actually to a panel to Slava Vakarchuk and Adrian to ask questions to you, Minister. Maybe we'll start with Slava.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
First of all, once again, I'm very happy to be here. I hope I'll have opportunity to talk later. But I have just very simple question, and I would like Mr. Ambassador to give me a simple answer. What is your personal attitude to the initiatives of the Consultative Council. Do you support it, or do you disagree with it as a person, as a diplomat, as a Ukrainian citizen? Thank you.
Thank you, Slava. Since you referred to ambassador, I think you have to specify which of ambassadors are you asking?
No, okay. It was not a joke. I just mean that you have an experience to be a diplomat and ambassador, and so you understand. You are more than just a politician, although today you are a political appointee. But I ask you a direct question, and I want, if you can give me a direct answer, your personal opinion.
Never expect direct answers from diplomats. I think that's kind of a rule of our profession. But the answer is very simple. I will never agree as minister to a direct dialogue between Ukrainian officials and the so-called Donetsk and Lugansk representatives. Everything else is the field or the space for the art of diplomacy. But there are certain red lines which I will not cross as foreign minister or a citizen of Ukraine, and this is one of them.
Thank you. Adrian, over to you.
Yes, so there was a lot of controversy about this dialogue process with the Orglo, attendant to the discussions and papers that were signed on March 11th. But the most controversial was that the documents were signed by representatives of the Orglo in a protocol where they were referred to as plenipotentiary representatives of the Orglo, of the special regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. To my understanding, and if you can confirm it, was this the first time in any diplomatic relationship that Ukraine affixed its agreement to such terminology? And secondly, is it the position of Ukraine to start using this terminology in the future for those participants as advisors to the Russian side? And third, if it is not, can you confirm that Ukraine will not sign any further documents or protocols in which these gentlemen are referred to as the plenipotentiary representatives?
For me, as diplomat, we can only speak about plenipotentiary ambassadors. That's the issue. On the issue of who and in which capacity will be signing documents, I think we have to wait and to see which documents and how will be signed, if any at all, can be arranged so within trilateral contact group. What I can easily share with you right now is that 2 meetings of trilateral contact group have already taken place in the format of video conference. And in all cases, we never signed anything. And the exchange of communication between participants of these meetings is taking place in accordance with the practice established in previous years, which means that we do not communicate with each other. We send our communications to the technical support unit of the Minsk group, and the OSCE coordinates further communication. So if I may remain a diplomat and provide you with this answer, then I will appreciate if you accept it.
Well, we'll have to accept it at this point, and I will use the last 4 or 5 minutes that we have for a question from David Kramer, another experienced diplomat and an expert on Ukraine. In a way, it comes in a circle where we started. We do know that the keys to peace in Ukraine are in the Kremlin, lie in the Kremlin to a large extent. So David is asking, do you see any indication to suggest that Putin is interested in resolving the war, withdrawing his forces from Ukrainian territory and respecting Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, especially in light of the pandemic situation?
I think that I believe that President Putin has no other choice but to withdraw from Ukraine, from eastern Ukraine and from Crimea as well. Everything else is just a matter of time.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. I understand that you have some other duties to go to. We will be continuing with the panel. It will be recorded, so you can watch the rest of our conversation later on. And we hope you do. Thank you for your time. Гарного дня. And I will move now to our next speaker. And I would like to ask Ambassador Taylor, who has worked a lot in Ukraine and especially closely with President Zelenskyy during his time in Kyiv. From your point of view, from the art of possible, how do you assess the strategy of Zelenskyy in dealing with Russia? And do you see any deviation from that course that you've seen in Ukraine or over the last year and during President Poroshenko? If you could compare a little bit, do you see anything changes with this consultative council? Is there any worry that you have that perhaps Ukraine is falling into Putin's trap?
Thank you, Russia. I appreciate your question. Appreciate being here. I'm glad that the Institute of Peace can co-sponsor this discussion. Yeah, I had the opportunity last year to both see the president in his campaign, as well as in his first days in office, as well as when he put together the government and through the fall. And I will say that the goal remained the same. The goal was clear. That was to end the war on Ukrainian terms, protecting the sovereignty of the nation within internationally recognized borders. That goal was stated clearly during the campaign and was adhered to during the time that I observed. In answer to your question, Rosa, it does seem to me that the president and his team, which is, as we know, changed. There are a couple of changes over the months, did change. The tactics changed. The goal was the same, but it seemed to me that they were willing to try things. They were willing to experiment. And these experimentations, some worked and some didn't work. We're aware of the flirtation with the Steinmeier formula. Not such a great idea. And several of us had conversations with the president about that. Disengagements. Some of the disengagements worked in some sense. That I'm thinking of Stanitsa-Luhanska Bridge, where that was able to be repaired and people could move across that bridge more easily. Old people, young people were able to move that. So that was important. We've talked already about the prisoner releases. The prisoner releases was a big deal. I remember the Saturday that the first batch of prisoners came back and the sailors. It was a spontaneous national holiday. So that experiment, that work seemed to pay off. There have been other kinds of experiments that focused on humanitarian or people-to-people or the ability of individual Ukrainians to live and prosper and suffer less. And I'm thinking of some of the changes made at the border crossings. I visited several of them myself with the previous foreign minister and with the previous national security advisor, who I will say were very interested, as was the president, they told me, in the well-being of people on both sides of the line, both sides of the border crossings, and looking for ways to make those border crossings easier. I mentioned the bridge, but down in the border crossing with the temporary border crossing from Kherson into Crimea, the requirement that people had to walk for a kilometer and a half in the heat, this was during the summer, was real concern to this administration. So looking for ways to make lives of Ukrainians better in this seems to me a change, a focus. You mentioned the Consultative Council. I would just say that one experiment that it seems to me that they have been trying, and this is an example of that, is talking to people on the other side. I think the foreign minister just mentioned they're not talking to the representatives or the puppets of the LNR and DNR. no one should be talking to them. They're non-entities. But there are Ukrainians living in Orlo. And there are Ukrainians that sooner or later, we hope, will be reintegrated into Ukraine. And so conversations with these people seem to me to make some sense. And that's an experiment that they can usefully play. So I think there have been some changes in tactics and some experiments. Some have worked, some haven't. But I look forward to seeing more of those.
Are you there?
Yeah, you're still there, John. Hey.
I'm here.
Good.
Okay, we seem to have lost contact with our moderator, so I will ask the next question. Slava, you're the leader of an important opposition party, which has been cooperating with President Zelenskyy. Take on this development in the Minsk negotiations would be most welcome.
First of all, I think that the most important promise of the president was to end the war, but many people in the country, in Ukraine, understood differently. And that was probably the biggest problem of the campaign of President Zelenskyy, because he told so many things that could be broadly treated by different analysts or generally by the constituency. So when you say, I want to end the war, there is a question, okay, but on whose conditions? So our party is very strongly committed to the thing that the only peace that Ukraine can achieve and need to achieve, the peace by Ukrainian means, because sometimes you can achieve peace by the enemy's means and on their condition, and that can be actually, that can lead to the end of your country per se. So for us, it's absolutely unacceptable crossing these so-called red lines, and I'm very happy that Minister Kuleba mentioned that red lines, but once again, you need to define these red lines and not just talking about red lines as about vague kind of definition, but to say what does it mean. And one of these red lines is suddenly that Ukrainian, the war in the east of Ukraine is not an internal conflict of Ukraine. It is a war imposed, orchestrated, and actually being, kind of made by Russia. And it is a war of Russia against Ukraine. And we treat it very, very straightforwardly. So this is red line we cannot cross. And what worries me and worries a lot of other people, and actually it's not only about the Holocaust or our supporters or our members of the party, but a lot of analysts we talked with, and a lot of people from civil society, all of them became very anxious and suspected this so-called consolidative council that it's gonna undermine this kind of the idea that Ukraine is talking with our enemy with the help of our two allies that are, let's say, our partners, and help us to make this talk, which is a Normandy format. And actually this idea that we have so-called consolidative council, it really undermines and I'd say also dilutes the whole idea of this four countries talking directly with each other. And I understand the point of many other people that they say that the people from different parts of Ukraine, from our controlled by Ukraine party and from so-called Ordo parties, they need to talk. They may talk and they still talk. They have relatives. They have some, they go to see their relatives. Our checkpoints are working. So they can be, using their private possibilities to see each other and to have this dialogue. And they are doing it. But political dialogue between Ukraine and Kremlin puppets are unacceptable, because that only will make peace less achievable, not more achievable, because the more we bring, the more we put on the table initiatives that divide Ukrainian society, the more difficult path to a real peace we can see. And in our opinion, the only strategy that we can use now is to make Russia stop shooting. This is very clear, very simple, not very simply to achieve, but a very simple point. Just stop shooting first. And actually we have our plan of, we call it the cold deoccupation. And I think that most of you know about this plan. And the first and the most important point of this plan is stop shooting. And stop shooting not for a week or two, and not only on the points of engagement, but generally for half a year or even more. And then we can see that both sides are ready to stop the war. And only afterwards we can go further and we can talk about political points. We cannot talk about politics before we've solved all defense issues. And this is the other problem of this so-called consolidative council, because they once again entangle political and defensive issues, which in our opinion is a very dangerous thing to do. And one cannot be very naive and not be understand that Minsk agreements that actually Poroshenko's team signed literally on the barrel of a gun 5 years ago were designed by Russia the way that all defense and security and political issues were entangled with each other, the way that every next step of Ukrainian side will weaken our position and will make our sovereignty less, robust and less stable. So our task today, instead of creating some, initiatives that can divide Ukrainian society, is to come up with a plan which is actually supported by the whole Ukrainian society. And this is the number one thing that everybody in the country support, that we need to stop killing of our soldiers and our citizens. And this is the very simple thing. It's easier to say than to do, but that is, in my opinion, what the president and his team, including Minister Kuleba, should be doing, persuading our partners in Normandy format, France and Germany, and our partners in Budapest format, including certainly the United States, that we all need to push Russia to stop fighting. And this is the only strategy that, in our opinion, can work and can bring to some tangible results. All other things, including, kind of trying to find, with all my respect, Ambassador Taylor, how much I respect and even love you, but with all my respect, all these other formats, I think they only make things more complicated. Just, we need to put it simple, very simple, because all truth is simple. The truth is that Russia makes this war happen, and they can stop it to push one button and it'll stop.
Thank you, Slava. I am back with you. Sorry, I was for a minute disconnected. I hope you can hear me well now. But there's a question also in the chat from Jonathan Brunson, who is asking, will the Rada next vote on provisional special status, which it had extended, that expired at the end of 2018? Are there any discussions? Is there any cross-party discussion inside the parliament on what are the modalities of the special status and how it will fit or not fit with the decentralization constitutional change?
Thank you very much. So Holos position of Holos party is very clear. We voted strongly against this law, and we will vote against any special status further. We think it's very dangerous to create the idea of special status of Donbass, because it is a threat to Ukrainian sovereignty and independence. Even if it is a temporary thing, it's much our point is very simple. If you already have a temporary law, it's much easier to change it to a permanent one than to create a new one if there is none existing. And we think it's very dangerous to play with all these special statuses. Ukraine, by constitution, is a unitary country, not a federal country. In our political system, we are only ready now to accept this country as a whole territory where we have one constitution, one law, one set of laws, and what the rules are the same for everybody. So suddenly there should be some special attitude, understanding that we actually have war and there is part of the country that we don't control. So we need to make a roadmap. And this roadmap, actually, we work on it, we talk with our parties, but once again, let me emphasize on the very simple thing that before there is a long-lasting ceasefire, there should not be any serious political negotiations, because they, not only because they are like bad for Ukraine and for Ukrainian future, but also because they make things even more complicated. Let's first solve the problem of a ceasefire. And once it is solved, we can go further. So this is our proposal, and we will stand on it very firmly.
Thank you for answering that. So I'd like now to move to Adrian and ask him, from his experience of seeing Ukraine with many different administrations running the country. At the start of Zelensky's presidency, there were a lot of questions about his qualification, his team, whether he will be able to negotiate with Putin. And there were a lot of concerns about whether he'd be making some mistakes. Right now we have a new head of president's office, Andriy Yermak, who is in charge, clearly, especially working with Kozak in the trilateral group. How do you assess they are handling this process? Are they making some mistakes, or they are doing everything to defend Ukraine's national interest?
I think that President Zelensky was the embodiment of the sense of the Ukrainian people, which was a sense of hope, a sense of expectations, none of them grounded in the very difficult realities. Unrealistic expectations about how quickly you can change the court system and clean up corruption, unrealistic expectations that it's only a personal will to build a relationship with the president of Russia that will open the door to peace in the East. And I think he has received a kind of an education over the course of the year. But I think that one of the weaknesses of his current style of operating is that the core group of people on whom he relies are still very narrowly based. He's not reached out to embrace in his core inner circle people who've had a long period of expertise, either in foreign affairs or in even domestic policy. These are mainly people from the entertainment industry or entertainment lawyers and so on. They may be smart people and they may have certain capacity to grow on the job, but in the absence of those kinds of trusted, seasoned advisors, every president has had them, people like Volodymyr Arbulin or others, to whom you can turn to get a deeper insight into geopolitics or domestic affairs. That is sadly lacking. What is interesting is also that there was a kind of a scattershot approach in the selection of the people who made up the 254 vote majority in the Rada from the Servant of the People Party. But we've seen over the course of the last few months, the coalescing of people who got into that list on the basis of liberal, pro-European policies and also patriotic policies, and asserting a kind of an independence. So while it is now possible to say that there is no longer this supermajority, there are situational majorities inside the Rada. And I think that the emergence of this group of young people, many of them Western educated, many of them active in anti-corruption civil society efforts that made it into the servant group. They're the ones who were among the 65 or so who signed the initial document opposing the concessions made on March 11th in Minsk. And I think that that is another very healthy, and if the president embraces these people as constructive partners rather than sees them as somehow disloyal, I think he will improve his performance and enrich the performance of the administration.
Thanks, Adrian. There's a question here in the Q&A section that in view of President Zelensky's desire to reintegrate Donbass, and he even speaks of safely reintegrating Donbass, because, you know, probably Kremlin's idea is to just shuffle Donbass back to make it destabilize Ukraine even further. But in that view, I mean, Bill Hamilton is asking, the war has consolidated and strengthened pro-Western Ukrainian national identity. Is there room for residents of the occupied territories in such a definition of Ukrainian identity?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Okay. I think there is room because Ukraine is a democracy and Ukraine would vote on the various approaches to language, to culture, to civilization. I don't think you can make compromises on behalf of the opinion of the public. Yes, minority rights have to be respected, but Ukraine, as has been stated by Slava Vakarchuk, is a unitary state. It has made that kind of a choice. I would add that Russia primarily is a unitary state except for the Tatar autonomy, and it tolerates no breaching of that kind of a standard. So I think, you know, and what is the reality of Ukraine? Ukraine, when different factions and different administrations have been in power, there has never been persecution of the people in the East. I think what is needed is a communications campaign to make the people of the Donbass remember that they were basically left alone and allowed to handle their own affairs. They had, in effect, decentralization, perhaps too much decentralization in the past, but there's never been the case that the Ukrainian centralized government has ever come and tried to impose a national identity on them, etc. I think you know, what we're dealing with is how to undo Russian propaganda and pro-Russian propaganda that has been persistent over the course of 6 years and has made some inroads. And I think that is what the president is trying to do. So in my view, there is no compromise to be made. Ukraine is, the idea of reintegrating Donbass is not to put a part of Russia inside Ukraine. It's to put a specific part of Ukraine back into Ukraine, but operating under the general rules that are adjudicated in the democratic process through the Rada, through elections, and through the wisdom of its elected leaders.
Thank you for answering this one. So now we'll move to Ambassador Herbst. Of course, Ukraine cannot withstand Russian aggression on its own, but on the other hand, Russia cannot win against the United West. And these are the two pieces of the, you know, the same problem that is important to keep in focus. United States has always been a strong ally of Ukraine in this struggle against Russia. With, you know, the impeachment hearings, with Trump's presidency, with Zelenskyy is in office right now. After all of this turmoil, would you say that the bipartisan support for Ukraine hold? And, you know, what is the impact of right now having no U.S. special representative for Ukraine? We do know that Kurt Volker spent quite a lot of time shuttling between the different European capitals, keeping everybody on the same page, consolidating positions. How would you assess the current role of the United States in helping resolve this conflict?
First, it's important to recognize that despite the questions surrounding impeachment proceedings here, bipartisan support for Ukraine in Congress remains rock solid. It's worth pointing out that even as the impeachment hearings were underway, Congress agreed to restore, or rather to maintain, military assistance to Ukraine, and even authorized an increase of $50 million in military assistance. And during the impeachment proceedings, Congress voted punishing sanctions which have severely delayed, if not destroyed, Nord Stream 2. And I spent a lot of time consulting with staff in Congress. I can tell you, Republicans and Democrats are firm in supporting Ukraine. Kurt Volker performed a terrific service as a special envoy. He made clear to the whole world something that everyone watching this event knows, which is that the war in Donbass is a war of Kremlin aggression against Ukraine. It's not any kind of civil war inside of Ukraine. So from that standpoint, Kurt's departure is a loss. But foreign policy of the United States, even under President Trump, remains strongly supportive of Ukraine and pushing back against Kremlin aggression in Ukraine. Pompeo is excellent on this, as is Esper at the Department of Defense, as is O'Brien at the NSC. And lower levels at state, with George Kent as the DAS, Philip Rieker as the acting assistant secretary, and Steve Biegun as the new deputy secretary of state, understand this issue really well and they recognize that America has important interests in making sure the Kremlin aggression in Donbass is defeated. So I don't have any doubt that even with Kurt's departure, Ukraine is getting quality attention from Pompeo, from Esper, and their teams at the Defense Department and the State Department.
Thank you, John. There's a question here from Michael Hrytzak about, is there any chance that the trilateral contact group will eventually add another state representative or state representatives, such as United States or other states providing military aid to Ukraine? There's been a lot of ideas floated in the way how Minsk could be or should be expanded, countries that were co-signatories of the Budapest Memorandum. Do we have all the tools to negotiate a deal? And it's just because Russia does not want to make any change in its position? Or do we need to think about new diplomatic platforms, some revisions of the existing ones? What would you say?
The Minsk process, prior to President Zelenskyy negotiating first the prisoner release last summer, and then President Zelenskyy having a successful summit in Paris, produced nothing for Ukraine. The only serious talks on ending Kremlin aggression in Donbass have taken place between first Tory Nuland and Surkov, and then between Kurt Volker and Surkov. So while I think it would be nice if the U.S. participated in the Minsk process, I don't think it's essential. And I think that when the U.S. engages, Russia pays attention and offers quality ideas. Unfortunately, those quality ideas have not led to quality proposals and quality policies on the part of Mr. Putin in getting out of Ukraine. But I agree with Foreign Minister Kuleba that Russia will eventually leave Donbass, and not in the very distant future. We're not talking about decades, we're talking about months or years. And eventually they will get out of Crimea, although that may take decades.
And here's one more question to Ambassador Hearst. Is there a talk of appointing a new U.S. envoy on Ukraine?
I would not rule it out, but I do not expect it. And
Okay.
while, again, Volker did a great job, you have very smart people paying attention to Ukraine in the State Department who are performing Volker's functions without those jobs. So Rieker and Kent, and for that matter, David Hale, the Undersecretary of State, have been in touch with the French and the German representatives so that we are coordinating. And others in the department may take over this function.
Thank you. I'll take another question and direct it to Ambassador Taylor from Beatriz Legarto. Assuming that Ukraine's negotiating position has not changed, and considering the key, if not dominant role of Russia in this peace process, what would compel Russia to leave Ukraine?
I agree with Ambassador Herbst that the Russians will leave Donbass in the nearer future, and they'll be inclined to that. I believe they are inclined to that for a couple of reasons. One is this is a loser for them. This does not bring them benefits. Their role, their soldiers in Donbass, this does not bring them benefits. It's only brought them pain and costs. The costs are in the form of sanctions. The sanctions hurt. The sanctions a percent of GDP a year. This is serious pain that they are enduring. Now they have the problem of the virus, which they have to deal with. And that's going to bring on the economic problems that are exacerbated by the sanctions. So they are looking at big problems, and they'll look for a way out.
Thank you. I'd like to bring in Slava with the following question. There's in some experts, countries like Ukraine or Moldova are called in-between states. And the question is whether it would be acceptable for a country like Ukraine, that some people see as in-between state between Russia and the European Union, to embrace the neutrality status and to continue economic, social, and cultural integration towards the West without, for example, NATO membership. Would that de-escalate the conflict? Would that be acceptable for Russia? And what would you say as Ukrainian to such proposition?
First of all, thank you for this question. First of all, I think there is no pattern that Ukraine can use because every example in the world's history is unique. There are our neighbors of a former Soviet bloc, like Poland or Baltic countries, that were very successful in the quick path to all European institutions, including NATO and European Union. There was a famous example which some experts now bring on the table, the Finland's example. We all know how difficult was Finland's history, especially in the relationship with Russia and the former Soviet Union, starting with the war in 1940, especially starting with being a colony of Russian Empire, and then the war of 1940, 1941, and then they ended up first winning, then formally losing the war and losing a big bulk of territory and becoming a neutral country, but actually staying an independent nation and managing to build a big prosperous society. I think Ukrainian example is unique. We are not in the position of Poland or Baltic countries today. We could have used this path. I strongly believe we could have used this path in 90s and the beginning of 2000s. But the former politicians were much more in Ukraine, much more preoccupied with, filling their pockets with dollars than with bringing Ukraine closer to West, not only in words, but in their deeds. And that's actually something that I think it was a wasted time to some extent. Today, I don't think we are the privilege of Poland or Baltic countries of the 90s. But still, I think our path is close integration with all European institutions and especially defense umbrella, which NATO is. I totally understand. I'm not a naive person. I don't think that Rome wasn't built in a day, and you cannot do this in one day. But I still think that this is a roadmap, or at least a start for us, a compass that we need to use, both because this is the only alternative for Ukraine to stand against very strong and unfortunately aggressive neighbor that we have next to us, but also because as we see from the 90s, that the integration and the roadmap and then generally the process of integration into both NATO and EU gives a lot of benefit to the nation. And that's why I think that what Ukraine needs to do now is first strongly claim our North Atlantic and European, let's say, our desire to follow this path. Second, not waiting for kind of guarantees or something, but just doing our job and making our army stronger, making the standards of our army closer to NATO, building a strong and independent and not corrupt court system, making this country where there is a rule of law, bringing foreign investment, all these kind of things, all our home tasks. We need to do it, whatever they say in Brussels or Washington, day by day, day by day. And I think the more we succeed, the more our efforts are resultative, the easier for us will be to persuade our partners that it's a worthwhile game for them to bring Ukraine closer and to make it member of these both respected and very important clubs, which EU and NATO are. In my personal opinion, their security kind of club, security umbrella is even more important for Ukraine today. Okay. And in this particular case, you having here two wonderful people who were ambassadors of Ukraine and represented United States, I want to state here in this company that I think the role of the United States may be very, very important in this particular in this scenario. And I think that it is of great importance that the United States continue to have a strong have a strong say, both in regulation of conflict, of war in Donbass, and also in generally in making Ukrainian positions, let's say, more successful now.
Thank you, Slava. And Adrian would like to add. He noted me on this question. Go ahead, Adrian.
I think there's a fundamental difference between, say, what happened with Finland and its pursuit of neutrality. Russia or the Soviet Union had territorial pretensions on Finland, but Mr. Putin has ethno-national pretensions on Ukraine. He isn't interested in the territory. He is interested in saying that the people of Ukraine are actually the Russian people, and so potentially subject to both his sphere of influence and his sphere of dominance, and potentially participants in a unitary state. And so when we discuss the prospects for peace, what we really have to deal with is the reality that Mr. Putin does not want the existence of either the Ukrainian people or the Ukrainian state. And what we need to do is to find the types of mechanisms that will constrain him until, over time, different leaders find different solutions in Russia.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Good, we have agreement here. And also there's a shifting public opinion inside Ukraine for how it sees its security, and support for NATO membership has increased dramatically since Russian aggression on Ukraine. And that's important because why Ukraine is also not Russia is public opinion matters. And Slava knows that as politician, you have to listen to Ukrainian citizens and act upon very important change in public opinion that happens, especially around NATO. I have a question. We will take a few more questions. One,
sorry to interrupt you, but you know that the majority of Ukrainians support the idea that Ukraine can join NATO now. It's probably the first time in 30 years of our history.
Exactly. So Tatiana Voroshko is asking, I would like to direct it to John Herbst, about are there any indicators that the US military and other assistance to Ukraine might be affected by COVID-19 pandemic and the stress it puts on the US economy? Is there any risk that it may decrease?
The short answer to that is no. Again, I'm having 4 or 5 meetings a week with staffers from Congress. And I can tell you, again, Republicans and Democrats are strongly interested, even in the age of coronavirus, in our policy towards Ukraine, supporting Ukraine against Kremlin aggression, and our policy towards Russia, making sure Russia pays a price for its aggression in Ukraine and elsewhere. In these very interesting times, I can't rule out someone proposing to limit foreign assistance, foreign military assistance. But even if that conversation begins, I don't think it will affect American military assistance to Ukraine or economic assistance.
Ambassador Taylor, this one is from Denis Yasishin about, can we expect tougher sanctions on Russia? And in a way, what may prompt tougher sanctions on Russia from the United States side?
If the Russians were to invade further, if the Russians were to send more troops, if the Russians were to violate the borders, if the Russians were to send their proxies into other parts of Donbass, that is, if the Russians were to exacerbate the situation, I think, yes, that it would be possible for the reasons that Ambassador Herbst said. There is strong support in our Congress for these kinds of sanctions, and the Congress has been very clear about this. And that kind of aggressive behavior on the part of the Russians would prompt more sanctions, I believe.
And maybe we'll take this last question to all of the panelists, because it's interesting to hear your views from Vasil Babic, who is asking, UN peacekeeping mission in Donbass was proposed by Poroshenko's administration. This proposal has not yet been picked up by Zelensky's administration. Do you think there's still a room to make the UN peacekeeping mission a reality? What are crucial pros and cons of such mission? Maybe we'll start with Adrian and then go in that order.
Well, again, I think all of these are path dependent, and they're only realistic if Mr. Putin is interested in coming to a deal. I don't believe he is, so I think that this is a non-starter. Ambassador
Taylor?
So I disagree with Adrian. I think, as I said earlier, I think Mr. Putin does want to get out of Donbass, and I think an international peacekeeping force authorized by, but not run by, the Security Council is a real option.
Slava, is your party promoting the idea of the peacekeeping mission?
Our party is promoting our plan, which I will be ready to share with everybody who still haven't read it. And certainly one of the items of this plan, but not the first one, is certainly the possibility of bringing some peacekeeping mission, should it be UN mission or OSCE mission. But certainly there should be some intermediate mission with international mandate before Ukraine gets this territory back fully, because you need this part. So we support the idea that should be some international mandate for that mission. But first, once again, I will state it once again, it should be a long-lasting ceasefire. Before that happens, nothing else is ever possible.
Yes, there needs to be peace to be kept in the first place, in a way.
Yeah.
Ambassador Herbst.
I'm somewhere in between Bill and Adrian. I believe that Mr. Putin does not see a need at the present time to leave Donbass. But I believe that there are thoughtful people in Russia who understands, as Bill said, that Moscow's excellent adventure in Ukraine has been a disaster for them. It's hurt their economy, it's hurt their international position. And eventually they'll have to leave. When that day comes, the whole concept of an international peacekeeping mission may provide a cover for Mr. Putin to get out with a shred of dignity. I'm happy to give him all the dignity he wants as long as he gets the you-know-what out of Donbass and ends his war there.
Yes, I see the raising hands of Slava, please.
Just one very important thing. One of the other days, recently, Russian authorities, I think it was Putin himself, who raised this question that today during the pandemic, coronavirus, everybody should, let's say, put a quarantine on sanctions for other countries because that's, weakens their economy and that's not the time for the sanctions. I think this is absolutely unacceptable. And I hope our partners in all countries, including the United States, understand that, because the sanctions were imposed on Russia not because of pandemic or something like that, but because of their cruel violation of international order. And so I think that connection or playing on feelings of countries who are hit hard by coronavirus pandemic now is absolutely unacceptable. It's very cynical. It's very manipulative, and we need to strongly stand against it.
Thank you very much. I think we will be wrapping up our conversation today. We still have quite a lot of questions, but obviously it's normal. We had almost 163 participants in joining us today in this conversation. I think sometimes in politics and in life, the most difficult is to do nothing. In a way, from this conversation, what I understand is that, Zelenskyy has to persevere in keeping the front lines of Ukraine defended, is to maintaining this resilience of the country and keeping unity, which is so important for Ukraine to overcoming this aggression. There's still a lot to do for Ukraine's diplomacy, and Ukrainians are putting a lot of hopes on the foreign minister and his team. Obviously, they are not favoring the military scenario, regardless of all the disinformation and warmongering of Russia about Ukraine. And I would like to thank everybody for joining today. I cannot say join me in the round of applause, but you can clap whenever you are, to all the speakers. I think it's been very informative. Perhaps this time Chatham House would take a baton from the Atlantic Council and continue this conversation on Donbass. We have something in the pipeline where we'll share with everybody the information. But thank you, Atlantic Council, for having such a star panel, for all your insights. Wishing all the happy Easter who are celebrating this weekend and those who are celebrating next one. Thank you for joining us, and have a nice evening.
And stay at home.
Stay at home, save lives. I will not continue because the rest is very British.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.